for once.
Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host. And this evening we have as our guests John Kurland, who is our town moderator, and Paul Cohen, who is our town manager. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the show. And the reason we have John and Paul on together is to discuss the upcoming spring town meeting. So, John, we'll start with you. You are the town moderator, so why don't you give us just a very brief synopsis of what a town meeting is and why we have it?
Oh, you want me to give it brief?
Brief.
You know
I know that's going to be very hard for you, but no.
Okay, well,
We're
look,
not going to get off that easy.
town meeting is the legislative body of the town. There are essentially our legislature. They pass the bills that are necessary for the town to run. And our town meeting reps are elected from the various precincts. And at town meeting, my function is to make sure that it runs smoothly, or at least as smoothly as I can make it.
Okay, that's good. What else does the moderator do?
I appoint the finance committee.
There you go.
And I also annually jointly chair the select board and the school committee when they vote on the nomination for the Neshoba Valley Technical High School school committee members from the town.
Okay, that's good. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. So we have the town meeting, which is the legislative arm of the town government, I guess, and now we have the town manager. So the town manager's role at the town meeting.
In Chelmsford, the role is basically to be the primary presenter at the town meeting for obviously the budget, because in Chelmsford the budget is the town manager's budget. And at spring town meeting, the predominant nature of the articles, particularly the articles at the beginning of the warrant, all pertain to the town's operating budget, capital budget, and other matters. And so the town manager's role is to present that budget, address questions, and also bring in the assistance of the relevant department heads and other town officials who can help the town meeting with the understanding of what's being presented to them.
Okay, I think that's a very, very good explanation. So, and you've alluded to it just now. In Chelmsford, we have a representative town meeting versus what is alternatively called an open town meeting. So, would you care to tell us the difference between the two?
Yeah, in some communities, with the population gets to a point where they just don't think it's able to bring everybody into one collective hall, whether it be a auditorium or a gymnasium and so forth. So they, as the name suggests, they elect reps from the various precincts of the town. And in Chelmsford, we have 11 precincts, and there's 15 people elected in each of the 11 precincts. Those 15 people elected for 3-year staggered terms, so every year 1/3 of the 15 from each precinct are up for election. And they are the voting representatives of their community, subject to the fact that any action at town meeting can be subject to a referendum procedure. So therefore, if people took exception to the action at town meeting, they have 7 days from the close of the adjournment of town meeting to bring a referendum procedure at town meeting. And that's been used rarely, but that's how it works. So the idea is you've replaced the pure direct democracy of open town meeting with a representative form of government. And in most communities that Chelmsford size, where we're over 35,000 in population, it is a representative form of government as opposed to open town meeting that you'd find in generally a smaller town like Carlisle or Dunstable or Pepperell and so forth.
Although Tewksbury still has an
Tewksbury still is open.
And they're what, 32, 33,000?
Right, and Drake it does as well.
Right.
But Billerica has a representative town meeting, and then the next step above that would be going from representative town meeting form of government to a council manager or council mayor form of government, of which you eliminate the large number of reps, and then you would either elect anywhere from 9 to 17 representatives, either town or citywide or by precinct, or a combination thereof. So that's sort of how representative town meeting falls in the spectrum of town meeting form of government or legislative actions in a community in Massachusetts.
And I think that's a very good explanation. My feeling is that we probably, at least within my lifetime, you'll never see a council manager form. My experience is that there are people who get elected to be town meeting representatives, and they get to be very jealous of their position. And we'd have to have the town meeting vote first, right, to eliminate that and go to another form, and then it would have to go to a townwide ballot. So I see the likelihood of that happening in town is, I think, remote at best.
Yeah, I think the only thing you've seen in recent years is the decline in the number of people seeking to serve at town meeting through the ballot box.
Right.
And also a little bit of decline in the attendance by the reps. I mean, in some cases where we have 165 reps, really, on most occasions, we have, 125, 130, and then as you go further into multiple sessions, that number tends to diminish.
Second night it drops
Yep,
off,
exactly.
so on and so forth. So John, why don't you give us a little bit of an outline of just a general process? So now we're sitting at the town meeting and the warrant comes up with all of the articles that require the action by the town meeting. What happens, and then maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you term to be a consent agenda. How does that work?
Well, that's, okay, well, let's
One
take
thing at a time.
Take A
Right.
before B.
Right.
Well, essentially, I would ask the presenter, which is more often than not the town manager, to present the article. He would explain it. There are slides that have the language, and sometimes there are slides that actually go through to show the town meeting reps in greater detail what the article really has to do, especially if it has to do with a school building or zoning or things like that, and budget. And then when the town manager has completed his presentation, I ask the finance committee what their recommendation is, and they can vote to support it, or they can vote not to. And then I ask the select board. And then if it's, for example, if it's related to the school, I'll ask the school committee, or if it regards Neshoba Valley, I'll ask them, or if it's a zoning bylaw, I'll ask the planning board. And then there's an opportunity for the town meeting representatives to ask questions and to debate how they feel about that particular warrant article. It's interesting, I just revamped the moderator's bylaws, and I was very lax for a number of years because the old bylaws only permitted 2 questions. So if somebody got up, they were limited to asking 2 questions of the presenter, which to me seemed to be onerous. So in my generous spirit, I've doubled it. So now it's limited to 4. But I used to let people ask 7 or 8.
Yes, you did.
And because I feel it's important for people to really understand the article. But sometimes when you get to ask too many, you sort of fall afield from what the town meeting is designed to address with that particular article.
Sometimes the questions devolve into something else.
Right.
Debate and so on, and then you have to take some action at that point to reel the person back into where they're
Right.
supposed to be.
That's primarily what I do is
Right.
if somebody's asking an improper question or if they're going too far afield. We also have some rules of decorum, which I discuss at the beginning of town meeting so that people understand you can't slander anybody, you can't, we try to really have a very respectful town meeting. And for I would say 98% of the time we really do. Very few raised voices. And then after all of the debates back and forth, we put it up to a vote. And fortunately, we have an electronic voting system so that everybody can see what everybody voted on, whether they supported it or opposed it or they abstained. And it's also available on the town website, so you can, if you don't get to see town meeting, which, I'm there and I can tell you how tedious it can be, you can actually see how your reps voted on a particular article and if they voted the way that you wanted them to vote or if they didn't. And that's basically the process from my perspective. As regarding the consent agenda, we instituted this process whereby we could bundle a bunch of routine articles into one vote. So we have a number of them that are, they're normally funding situations where by law we are required to fund particular things. For example, we use money from cemetery to.
These would come up every year.
Yeah, these come up every year. So we just bundle them all together, and then the manager presents all of them. The reps have an opportunity to question them and to discuss them. I find that with the consent agenda, one of the other serendipity offsets is that most of the time they don't actually ask a lot of questions or debate during the consent agenda. So we can go through a large number of articles relatively quickly.
That's a good measure as to whether or not you selected the appropriate articles for consent agenda. If routinely there is no debate or very little debate, then
Right.
you got it right. That
Yeah,
would be
well,
that would be my take on it.
Some days we get it terribly wrong, but most of the time
You
we're-
also have a
right.
process where a town meeting rep can request to have the particular item removed from the consent agenda.
Right, or another article added to it.
Yeah, I don't remember. Has that ever happened?
No,
No.
not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. Probably shouldn't have brought it up, right? We don't want to.
Well, I tell them that they do have that right.
Yes.
I do send a letter that goes out to all the town meeting
Right.
reps. In April, it's right after the election, and in October, it's when the town clerk sends her notice out that discusses the consent agenda articles so that they can take a look at them and see beforehand what's going to be included.
So let's say I'm a town resident, which I am, but I'm not a town meeting rep. I want to go to town meeting. To what degree can I participate in the proceedings?
Well, if you're really good, you can be the moderator, but
No, we don't want to do that.
No, really, other than vote, you can certainly ask questions, you can certainly engage in debate, you just can't vote. So it really, and we've had situations where we had a plastic bag thing where, I mean, people came in from everywhere.
Remember that well, yes.
And everybody wanted to talk about plastic bags, and I think somebody even dressed up as a plastic bag.
Yes, they did.
But you know, but more often than not, we don't have a lot. If there's a particular article that has an impact in a particular neighborhood, we may see some more of that.
And people can also, non-town meeting reps, just residents, they can also put forth motions, but don't they have to do it through a representative? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
So basically, you can do anything except vote.
Right.
Is what it boils down to. So
Right.
it always amazes me. I guess people don't know that, although I think we try to publicize that fact, but so few people actually show up at the meeting, and maybe that's just because we're televised. You know, and people say, well, I can watch it on TV. Why should I go and sit in the hall when I can see it on TV? Well, I think we've got a pretty good picture of what town meeting is and how it operates. So let's talk a little bit about some of the items that we have on the warrant this year. And I pulled this off the town website, so I assume this is pretty accurate. We've got 34 separate actions. And I should know this because I'm on the Finance Committee. I don't remember, but you have, what, at least 8 or 9 that are in consent agenda, right, John?
Almost a dozen, right?
Is it more than, yeah, it's
12.
It's 12,
Exactly.
okay. So that cuts at least 15 or 20 minutes, I think.
On the other hand,
from
the
meeting time.
first article is the reports of town officers and committees,
Yeah.
which can be a while.
What do we have this year? Do we have anything substantive there?
We're trying to keep it brief, so one will be the report, real brief on the Strategic Plan Committee, which has just completed its work and letting the community know that the strategic plan is completed and it's available for viewing on the website and so forth. The Parker School Building Committee, which the building we're in right now, there's where they are in terms of the feasibility study to explore a replacement building, we'll be reporting. And then I'll just be giving a financial overview of all the articles on the warrant to give the town meeting reps a bit of a background. So that's what we'll have on the consent agenda. So it's pretty streamlined.
No, that's good. Now, we have 2 items here that actually the Finance Committee has not yet considered. It's Article 2 and Article 6. Article 2 is to amend the fiscal year 2025 operating budget, and Article 6 is collective bargaining agreements, which I believe there were 3 of those.
Yes.
And that all, they're all relative to the police department. So I can't remember a time when you've had all, well, I understand that the police department now, they have 3 bargaining units where they had 2, but I can't remember a time where even 2 were done together. Am I?
Yeah, I mean, this was novel. This
Yeah.
is the first bargaining agreement for the lieutenants union. And then once we got that framework into place, they have the same union affiliation with the sergeants union.
Okay.
Although they're a separate group. So we then pivoted to the sergeants group because we had the same rep there from their affiliated organization. And then once we had that done, we then pivoted to the patrol group and said, you know, they're all working the same building and they're all aware of what transpired. So they're all coming in. The select board have approved all 3 contracts, and town meetings will ask to fund the first year of funding for those contracts to ratify them. And so that will be presented to the finance committee this Thursday evening, and again they're in line with what the market is out there. So we think it'll be fine.
And I know that your presentation is going to be very comprehensive. I don't really see too much of an issue with that. I think that should go through fairly smoothly, I would think. But some of the other articles, now I could be wrong, but I identified a few that I thought might cause some discussion. Article 8, which is the capital, which is it's not a lot of money, but my experience with town meeting tells me that for some reason, the capital always sparks a lot of debate. There are people who feel that we're spending too much on capital, or people who feel we're not spending enough on capital, and that's usually the nature of that debate. How do you feel? Do we have anything that's particularly burdensome or unusual this year as a capital request?
I mean, I think what people will see in the capital, and I think the issue is if you're presented with the $74 million school budget, you really can't dive too much into the weeds and be productive. And the school committee has autonomy anyway. So even if you object to something in the school budget, town meeting can't control it. On the capital budget, what you're seeing is specific, as you said, specific capital or infrastructure investments, whether it's purchase of a vehicle or roof replacement and so forth. And so people tend to by nature of specificity, will ask a question. As what I think we're seeing there is generally it's roof projects, and that's really, the town has aging infrastructure in terms of the schools and so forth. So you're seeing a series of school roof projects. You're seeing some safety enhancements on the schools in terms of the entryways, secure entryways, vestibules that have some have already been installed at McCarthy School and at the high school. So they're going to go to the remainder of the schools. There's funding for sidewalks and road construction. So sometimes you get questions about, well, what roads are being paved and why. I don't think there's anything extraordinary or exotic in the capital this year. It tends to follow lines of departmental equipment and major infrastructure like roofs and computers and so forth. So it basically if there are extraordinary items that are major, they would tend to be a separate article.
Right.
So if we were doing obviously like the Parker School project, that would be a major article, or something like a strategic plan, which isn't capital. But if there's something that's that's rather unique, they tend to be placed as separate articles. And so the idea is the town has a 5-year rolling capital improvement plan, which is meant to demonstrate to the community that look what we have in front of us. We need to replace fire apparatus in so many years. We need to replace DPW equipment. We need to maintain our investments in our roads and sidewalks and as I said, facilities, boilers, and such.
And we didn't always have that. I mean, I can remember when we really had no formal capital plan, and when we started doing it, there was a lot of pushback, because people didn't think it was necessary. But I think it's proven out to be necessary and something that the community appreciates. So another article I have marked here is number 17, property valuation services, which by the nature of what it is shouldn't be controversial. But whenever you're talking about potentially people coming into your home to see what the valuation is, the assessors actually have to go into people's houses and do what they call a measure and list. So I anticipate there's going to be some discussion on that, just because that's part of what is required, and that's something that you're going to.
Yeah, we're required as a town to do a 5-year townwide property revaluation, and we're required every 10 years to visit every property. And we are at that point where this is the revaluation year, and so we're going to take this year, obviously get our efforts completed for revaluation, and then next year complete the additional inspections. And so you're right, anytime you put an article on that talks about property valuation, because it's kind of like taxes, that you only hear from people who are dissatisfied with what they've received, and then but the bottom line is the town has no choice, because if you don't perform the revaluation or the inspections, then the town can't issue its tax bills, and then technically the town's at a fault. Which
In fact, Sam, that was one article
Yeah.
that originally was going to be on the consent agenda, and we decided not to
No,
put it on.
no. Oh, so I got it right.
Yeah, you got
All
it
that's,
right. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the last time, 9-10 years ago, when we did it, and I won't give the name, but
Yeah.
certain town meeting members stood up and waved the Constitution over their head and started saying about how they weren't going to let the person in, and went on at length. And when she got through her little diatribe, she said, "Well, what do you think about that?" And the answer was, "Don't let them in."
No.
Right,
That-
right.
That's the end. So there's no requirement that you let somebody in, but as an FYI, if an assessor shows up at your house to do a measure and list and you don't let him in or her, you have foreclosed your ability to file to challenge your assessment. Okay. Because you won't be able to file before the appellate tax board. So
And
just
it
remember
understands the fairness of the system, because the
Correct.
idea is to spread the tax burden proportionally based upon value
Exactly,
of property.
and it has to be accurate. So another article I have, that potential controversy, would be Article 20, which is study options to fund and improve municipal operations. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's going to generate any?
Well, I think it may, because people are going to ask, what are we going to study? And the answer is, we don't know.
Uh-oh.
Because what we do know is that we're right now, in the era that we're in right now, we're in a period of tremendous financial uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen with the federal funding that supports state and local government. We also don't know what the economy will be in terms of inflation going forward. What we do know is we have a 5-year financial forecast which demonstrated, as is the case this year, that we cannot maintain level service operations. So therefore, you're left with two choices: make service cuts and/or provide additional revenue sources. One of those was put on the ballot. The select board put a question on saying, would the town be interested in exploring the sale of retail cannabis or marijuana? And the town said no. But had they said yes, there would have been a cost involved to.
Were you surprised?
I was surprised by the magnitude of the defeat, which was, pathetic.
Were you surprised, John?
Yeah, I was, but
Make that 3. All three of us.
well,
The magnitude of I think the magnitude
Both.
was shocking.
right.
Yeah.
I think that unfortunately we cannot message out and say, listen, the revenue will assist us from preventing cuts in services, or at least ameliorate it to some degree. I'm not sure. I think that when people see marijuana and Chelmsford,
No, I understand.
There's a gut reaction.
I absolutely, and I don't fault people voting one way or the other. I mean, and I understand that because there are issues, but the reason I was shocked at that vote was when it failed the first time. It was a brand new concept that had not been tested yet in the state. So it made perfect sense to me that people would vote against it because fear of the unknown, and nobody likes change. I get that. But the reason I was surprised is we've had, 6 or
9
7
years.
years? Has it
9
been
years.
9
9
years? So
years
we've
now.
had 9 years of history. And unless I've missed something, nothing's blown up.
And our neighboring communities have retail
And
sales.
it's been successful,
Lowell,
okay?
Tewksbury,
And I
Baraga,
thought on that basis,
Kingsborough.
it would passed, so I was wrong. I'm
I-
not very good at
I think the other
predictions.
distinction was that
Yeah.
first ballot was on a state election ballot in November, which has a higher voter turnout.
Right.
You're approaching probably 60%.
That's a
Whereas
good
at a
point.
town election, you're at 12%. And clearly, there's a difference of the demographic of who votes in town elections versus who votes in
Yep.
in state/federal elections.
That's a good point.
And I think, therefore, I think if you put that question on the last November's ballot, you would have a different outcome in terms of the magnitude of victory or defeat.
Well, I think you're probably right. So we're running short of time here. Let's see if I can get to these other ones. Now, I've said Article 27, which is a citizen's petition by Mary Donovan, and she would like the town to explore the possibility of locating a pet cemetery. I'm saying that that's probably going to take some time because I think that's, for some people, that's an emotional issue, and they'll want to discuss it from that standpoint. What do you guys think?
I think it's really, she hasn't identified a parcel of land, so I see the article as almost like a resolution from town meeting, where they vote for it, they're sending a message to the select board and town manager, come back at a later time with a
Okay.
particular location and parcel of land and what it would cost to provide this. Or if you vote against it, then you can say, no, don't go there, we don't want to do that. So I think that's what would likely lead to prolonged discussion. And what we're doing as a courtesy to her, I think we'll ask the moderator to take it up as the first item of the second session of town meeting, because I just think it's polite
Right.
for her.
Right.
So.
And certainly we would not get
Petitioner, yeah.
Certainly that would be at least in a second session.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, have that done first, and I think that's great. And the other article I think might generate some discussion and controversy is the outdoor lighting, and there's actually two articles that pertain to that.
Yeah, it's really one article. The second one is the corollary, that if you
Right.
approve the article, you're basically revoking the zoning article.
Right.
And Kelly Beatty is a citizen petitioner, so I don't know who'll do the commentary on telemedia. On that
That's a good
article.
point. Yeah.
But no, that will generate a lot of discussion because it extends to not only commercial but to residential.
Right.
And I think that's where I think the moderator will be fielding a lot of questions and from the, through him. To
That's
present.
really, the Finance Committee voted unanimously not to recommend that article, and I think that's what killed it from the FinCom's point of view. If the residential had not been included in that, it only applied to commercial, I think it might have received a favorable recommendation, and then the Select Board voted 3-2 to recommend it.
Recommend it, and then the planning board, is obviously involved in it as well,
Yeah,
because
6-1.
6-1, so that
Right.
because it involves the zoning. So there'll be a lot of people weighing in.
So, John, do you have any thoughts on any of these articles? I mean,
I'm completely neutral.
are you
on all of
neutral?
them. I have to be neutral.
That
I cannot show favoritism on any of the articles.
That has to be the right answer for him, right?
Yep.
So would you care to tell us a little bit about what may happen in the future relative to the moderator's position without mentioning any other names, but just talk about yourself?
Well, this will be, I'm not going to run for re-election in April.
You heard it here first,
April
folks.
26, yeah.
Yep. So, but I'm looking to see if I appoint an assistant moderator to assist me for my final year in case, for whatever reason, I'm unable to appear on a particular evening, or just to show someone how everything is done and to make the process more understandable for someone who I think could possibly do a good job. So I'm looking for somebody.
And I think that's a wonderful idea. It falls under the general heading of succession planning, I guess. The only thing is that the moderator's position is an elected position.
Right.
But I really don't see any conflict there. I mean, that's fine. If you have an assistant moderator and that person, after a little bit of time, decides, yeah, I'd like to try for the position, go for it.
Right.
And then anyone else can run in opposition. So that's the way that works. Well, speaking for myself, I have to say I'm going to be very sorry to not have you as town moderator. I think you've done a fantastic job and you've run the meetings very well.
By the way, that was a paid political announcement.
Okay, yeah. He's going to buy me a cup of coffee after the show. And we're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
And I think it's been a very informative discussion, and we'll see you all at town meeting.